Washington absolutely has what it takes to upset Oregon.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you're getting this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, please make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well. So you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, for the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, we got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers out there today. We're going to be talking about basketball's injury troubles because they just got even worse ahead of the Acrisure Invitational, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. We'll talk about if Washington is going to be at full strength on Saturday, speaking of injuries, but the Huskies absolutely have a shot to upset the number 5 Oregon Ducks this weekend. Oregon is 7-point favorites coming into this game, or 6.5, thanks to our good friends over at FanDuel. And Lars, when you look at this game, Washington can upset Oregon if what?
Dezmen from the Rutgers game shows up one more time, and the offensive line with it. I think even though they went down early in that game, that was one where Dezmen was, again, it's one of 16 players, I think, all time in college football that have a 400, 100 games. So I'm not saying that's to mirror that exactly, but the way that Dezmen impacted the game, we saw it a little bit against Purdue and a little bit against UCLA as well. When Dezmen is at his best, it is both the run and pass working to his benefit, and not only just running to the end zone. I think that's going to be a significant key here, because with or without Jonah Coleman being at full strength or whatever he ends up being, which we'll talk about later, Dezmen brings a different element, and you have to account for him in a different way, that if he's not having that threat, it's just not the same guy.
No, I absolutely agree. And that's such a big part of this. And, to just jump ahead a little bit here, it does sound like the offensive line is going to be a little bit closer to full strength. And we'll talk about what that might look like later on, because I look at this Oregon defense and there's still a lot of talent on the front, right? Bear Alexander, Amari Washington in the middle are very good players, and you can't discount Tatum Tuioti, Matayo Uyunglele on the edge either. But I look at just where this offensive line was, especially compared to what it was last year, and I think it's night and day different. It's absolutely taken a big step forward this season. You can trust if Jerez returns at right tackle, what that might look like. And if he can't, we've seen from John Mills over these last 2 games that he absolutely has what it takes to play right tackle. We've seen Paki Finau thrive at left guard. Carver Willis has been more than rock solid all season long. And I look at Zach Henning too, and I feel like his performance has gone somewhat under the radar over the last couple of weeks, where a couple of the snaps haven't been great necessarily, but you look at the actual blocking numbers, and he's been more than solid. And I look at the way this defense is played, some of the injuries that Oregon is dealing with at wide receiver. We'll see what's going on with DeCorey and Moore, if Gary Bryant is able to suit up as well. I think that everything that the Huskies bring from a defensive standpoint, in terms of not just the pass rush and how much better the defensive line has been playing over the last couple of weeks, but all the talent that you have in the secondary, I'm not too concerned about Tacario Davis missing this game, after Jedd Fisch said after Saturday's game that he just had a minor injury in practice on Thursday and didn't have enough time to recover. I think that Washington's defense from front to back is also just so much improved from where it was last year that I think Washington absolutely has the talent to compete in this game. And I hate to bring this up, but I think it's a very fair point. If you don't lose that Wisconsin game, this team is ranked 15, 16, 17 in the country? It's somewhere in that ballpark. And one loss absolutely looms large. I'm not arguing. I'm not saying that you can't discount that loss, because that team has shown up before. But with this game also being at home, I think that is something that just really works in Washington's favor this weekend.
Yeah, I think Tacario not playing against UCLA really does kind of benefit this game, because of the fact that, he's got that extra week of rest. You didn't try and push him. And by the way, shout out Dylan Robinson, had 80 snaps in the game, solid game from him. So if he has to come in either a nickel or in reserve, you feel confident both about the starters that you have, Alex McLaughlin at safety, Mikkel, Ryland did some nice things against UCLA as well. Then not only is the secondary better, but the depth in the secondary is better as well. So I think that kind of, when you're playing Oregon especially, we've seen at times that kind of roller coaster effect of yeah, the starters hung, but then they caught up against the backups. So you have to manage those two waves. And when you match up against Oregon, everything starts up front. Like that's to me where this game, and I know it's the cliche, whoever wins in the trenches will win the game. But it really does come down to that because outside they match up, honestly, the matchup favors Washington, like you just mentioned with all those Oregon players. But Washington, when they had those 2 games in 23, what made the difference the most? Pressuring Bo Nix, getting him off schedule, those type of things. Because if Oregon's going to run their offense, you have to find a way to at least get them off the field every other drive or every third drive.
No, absolutely. And that's one of the things here where I look at the one game that Oregon has lost this season against Indiana. That was one of the things they did very well. They were able to force Dante Moore to make some bad decisions. They were able to force a couple of interceptions in that game. And while I do want to see what this matchup is going to look like between Washington's defensive line and Oregon's offensive line, I think when everything is clicking for Washington offensively, especially, it's just so hard to stop. And you mentioned Demond Williams earlier. We'll see what the status of Jonah Coleman and Denzel Boston are for this game. I feel like both of them are certainly going to suit up. We saw both of them play in this game. We'll talk about their roles in a few minutes here as well. But I look at what Washington's offense can be on the outside because Raiden Vinesbright is also cleared to return to this game. Again, we'll dive more into some of the specifics here in a couple of minutes, but I just think that with the talent that Washington has on the outside, Oregon secondary has absolutely done a tremendous job this season. It's leading the Big Ten in passing yards allowed this season. And I think that just all of the talent that Washington has in this game on the outside is certainly promising. And I think that having a guy like Denzel Boston back in the lineup who's going to command so much attention is just such a big benefit to Washington. I'm just curious to see how this receiver rotation is going to work because that's one of the things that I don't want to say it plays to Washington's benefit, but I just think that the Huskies have some specific matchups that I'm sure we'll dive into over the course of the week that could just be extremely beneficial, whether it's, somebody like Omari Evans just trying to get the ball into his hands, what Desmond Roebuck has been able to do just in terms of his route running and finding space against zone coverage, different things like that could favor the Huskies in this matchup, but it's all about staying on time, staying on schedule. And a big part of this does come back to the offensive line because in these last 2 games, in these last 2 wins, one of the biggest factors is Demond Williams was not sacked in either game.
Yeah, and to me, I'm glad you kind of segue into the perfect point that I wanted to make. This is that test for John Mills, where you did it against Purdue, you did it against UCLA. Neither one of those teams really are going to strike a fear in you as an offensive lineman, especially from a defensive pass rushing perspective. Oregon's a little bit different in that regard. So can John Mills, do it against the best of the best? We saw him against Ohio State. Can he do it at a different position, potentially at right tackle, against Oregon? And even if not, can Zach Henning, can he hold up against Bear Alexander and some of those guys in the middle for Oregon? There's a number of different matchups where I'm not saying I don't like the potential, but it's just this is just the latest test. And so far they passed the easiest ones, but this is now a pretty big one. And unfortunately, you don't really have a ton of playoff implications, but you do get to play spoiler, which Oregon tried to do twice in 23 and couldn't do. Just love bringing that up. But you look at it again where every year that game has always been somehow close of late. It's always been a 3-point game, except for last year. Last year, you kind of just throw out the window. But you throw everything out because last year was a lot of different reasons for why they were never going to win that game. The offensive line is not going to give up 10 sacks. I will make that bold prediction right now on Monday that
extra bold,
shocker. But I think not only will they not give up a ton of sacks, I just think this unit is a lot more together, and that's no shot at Will or Jedd or anything, but it's just it clicks better with Demond. The offensive line's been playing well of late. Just build on the positive momentum you've been giving yourself because you have every reason to beat Oregon. You just need to put it together against an elite team.
No, absolutely. And a big part of that is getting guys like Denzel Boston and Jonah Coleman back in the fold. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. And like I said a little bit earlier, if you want to take a look at this game, Oregon is just 6.5-point favorites in this game. And if you believe that the Huskies have what it takes to upset Oregon in Husky Stadium, and maybe knock him out of the college football playoff, just maybe, you should go check that out. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So let's dive into this. We talked to Jedd Fisch on Monday, and he seemed encouraged, I want to say is the right word here, about the status of Denzel Boston and Jonah Coleman, who both played very sparingly. Jonah got 11 snaps, I think it was, according to Pro Football Focus. Denzel Boston was out there for a few plays. He suited up. He just looked like a decoy for the most part. And Jedd Fisch said everything was just about making sure that he was healthy for this game against Oregon. And I couldn't agree with more with that statement, especially with how that game at UCLA turned out. And I look at this and he just said, yeah, their roles are going to be bigger. There's going to be much more thrown at them this week, because after the game, he talked about Jonah potentially getting back closer to a full workload this upcoming week. And I think that we're probably going to see that, but especially when you look at the backfield, I don't want to say you don't need that, because you absolutely do. Jonah is one of the best running backs in the country, no matter what way you slice it. But I look at everything else that Washington has in the backfield, and I'm curious to see how you might be able to just throw some different changeups and curveballs and whatever it might be with what Adam Muhammad has given you over the last couple of weeks, and especially with what Jordan Washington brings to the table as well, as we've seen him continue to emerge.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we were banging our heads against the wall last season, wondering what is it going to look like with Jonah, Adam, and Jonah all together. Like, that is a different dynamic of offense that you gave the other two, being Adam Muhammad and Jordan Washington, kind of a running start into this game where we know what a healthy Jonah Coleman can do. Like, we have seen it at Arizona. We've seen it for 2 years now at Washington. So there's no doubt that getting Jonah back to full strength is going to be huge. But how can you build off of that? Because the one thing you can do with the ground game is control the game. If you're able to control the trenches, set the tempo on offense, control the clock, things like that, you change the dynamic for what Oregon wants to do offensively, which is, traditionally go a little quicker, build on their lead, things like that. If you're able to control the game at home, that is way more favorable than trying to trade blow for blow, because I don't think that was going to work out in Washington's favor. It could, but I just feel a lot less, safe making that prediction.
I think that's fair, because let's talk about Denzel Boston. Let's talk about this passing game, because I mentioned it a few minutes ago. Great news on Raiden Vinesbright. He's been cleared to return for this game against Oregon, which is just awesome to see with how scary that situation was a couple of weeks ago. But I look at this passing game, right? And I mentioned it a few minutes ago, where Denzel just being able to handle, let's even just say it's 70% of his normal workload, which is every single snap. So if he's able to handle 70% of that, plus what Desmond Roebuck has given you, what Raiden Vinesbright has given you, plus, extra from Chris Lawson, extra from Omari Evans, maybe even more from Audric Harris, who showed some really nice ability to get separation. He just, him and Damon Williams were not on the same page really in this last game. I think that there's so much that this passing game can do. And like I said, it's going to be a much tougher test against this Oregon secondary than we've seen for either of the last couple of weeks. But at the same point, I just think that with Denzel Boston and how much he's able to tilt the field in his direction, and how much you have to respect what he brings to the table, I think that some of these other matchups for Washington, without, talking about a guy like Decker DeGraff, who's looked awesome over the last couple of weeks as well, I think that Washington, I don't want to say they have the upper hand because of what the numbers say about Oregon, but I just think that, especially when you probably check down below in the comments, it's a lot more of an even battle than some of the people down south, I'll say, might want to make it out to be.
Certainly more than the rankings would indicate, or like you mentioned, Oregon being fifth in the country and UW having 3 losses. It doesn't strike you as a game where these teams are evenly balanced, but they both kind of have strengths. They both have flaws. And to me, it's what's being at home, I think, is what is going to tilt this in their favor. Because when you talk about Denzel, you know what comes to mind when I think of Denzel and Oregon?
Please.
That block of Wayne, and I'm not trying to tie.
The first drive in 2022.
Exactly, where he ended up keying the block for Wayne pop-up was like a 20-ish, 15-yard touchdown run. That is the type of control that an impact that Denzel can have when it comes to, if he's at 70%, just have him be, making that key block and run. You don't have to throw 8-10 targets his way. He just knows how to play the game so well at such a high level. That's why he was on the field in 2022. That's why he's been able to emerge as one of the better receivers in the country, because, yeah, he's a dynamic pass catcher, but just his presence on the field allows you to account for another guy versus just, oh, hey, there's we got to go guard this, top receiver, at Maryland or whatever. They have good players in this conference, but what you don't have are players like Denzel, who you just have to account for, even if he's got one arm and a sling.
So I do like where you're going with that. I also want to make sure that we mention Omari Evans, because this was one of the weeks where we did see more from him. And it was great to see him just continue to get more snaps, get another start under his belt, and just play a bigger role in the offense. And this is another one of those games where maybe you're going to see a little bit more about why he was brought to Washington, because we spent so much time over the summer. Our buddy Zach Sako from Lockdown Nittany Lions came on here and talked about what he brings from an athletic and field stretching standpoint. And this is one of those weeks where one of those things could show up. And all of a sudden, if you do need to really account for him while you're also accounting for Denzel Boston, you can start to take more advantage of some of these one-on-one matchups you might have on the back end. But all of this only matters if the offensive line holds up. And like we said, it has been really solid over the last couple of weeks, but we don't expect Landon Hatch to play in this game. He'll probably be available like he has been for the last few weeks, but mainly in an emergency situation. Probably wouldn't end up at center either. He would probably wind up playing guard because his right hand is still in a ball cast. And I asked Jedd Fisch about that, and he said, yeah, there's no progress on that. He's still going to have to play in the ball cast this weekend, which probably means that Zach Henning will be in line for his third straight start at center. Well, we look at the rest of the offensive line. Right tackle is the only other position where there's major questions, and it's not because of who's playing there. It's not because of John Mills. It's because Drew Ezepardi has been the starter there all year long, and the way Washington has just let this offensive line operate, they feel that their best five right now is with John at left guard and Drew at right tackle, and I don't disagree in any way, shape, or form. Let me make that clear. But I look at this group, and if Drew is able to return, I'm really curious about what the snap count is going to continue to look like at right guard, because we know what Drew has been this season. He's been one of the most improved offensive linemen, not even offensive linemen, just players in the Big Ten. But how much more are we going to see from Champ Taulealea as well? Because this offensive line, in terms of size and strength and physicality, has continued to improve throughout the year. And for the last couple of weeks now, we've seen a 50-50 split between Gear and Hatchet and Champ at right guard.
And what's interesting is by the end of the UCLA game, he nearly doubled his season snap count. He had 52 coming into the game, Champ did, had 49 exiting the UCLA game. So kind of, to me, indicates I think he might, eclipse Gear and Hatchet again, when it comes to number of snaps there. And what we've seen from Champ more specifically is in the run game. But again, he's gotten a lot better in the passing game. I know you mentioned, I think you asked Jedd on Monday about kind of just the growth in Champ and some of the offensive linemen. And he gave, what you would think Jedd would say. But within that, it was like, hey, no, we had a plan for him. It was, he was going to play early on in the season, and then we'll just see what happens. And to me,
it was very clearly the red shirt plan.
Yeah, exactly. But it was still, you could see the potential there. Like, I still remember in fall camp driving past Husky Stadium, leaving the stadium, and we see this massive human being over here. And I'm like, which fifth-year offensive lineman is that? Oh, that's Champ. Okay, that checks out. So he's got the physical acumen to hold up, but he still needed to round out his game a little bit. And he came in, from high school as a better run blocker than a pass blocker. And in a game like this, if you're going to play 30, 40 snaps, you have to be able to hold up, especially in the interior trenches, because Oregon is going to bring it from a number of different areas. So Damon can run, but he shouldn't have to be a magician, because that's asking a little too much in this game.
And that's kind of the thing that I wanted to make sure we got into, is just regarding Champ in particular, is, again, the physical presence that he brings. And I mentioned Amari Washington, I mentioned Bear Alexander, and what those guys bring from especially a pass rush standpoint on the interior. I don't think it's what we saw from Derek Harmon and Caldwell last season, Damari Caldwell, but I think it's still really, really solid. Both those guys are absolutely great athletes. They're really talented. And Champ, just what he brings at 6'4", 340, 350 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark, is just so rock solid from that standpoint of run blocking. And as he continues to develop as a pass blocker, that's one of the biggest things that we've been waiting to see from him. And it's exactly what Jedd said in his answer. We wanted to make sure that we could give him a little bit of a running start and see what we have with him going into next season, because it's very clear that he's probably going to wind up as a starter next season as a redshirt freshman. And you look at this game in particular, the last couple of weeks of just what we've seen from him has been, okay, yeah, you're getting your feet under you against Purdue, against UCLA. And then now against Oregon, it's here comes that big test. Here comes exactly what we need to see from you to make sure that when we go into spring practice, you're that guy getting first team reps because, we've seen a lot of success from Paki Finau. We could see Jurassic Party come back. And then all of a sudden, one of these spots that you thought you might have open for a young guy, or maybe you're somebody sitting there saying, oh yeah, that's the spot I think I'm going to compete for next season. All of a sudden that's taken up and things are going to look a lot different. I'm just really curious to see how all that's going to work out next year.
But the good question within that is you have the amount of bodies and the talent to have those competition battles in spring and then probably a little bit in fall camp as well, because you didn't have it last year. And even this year, it's had to emerge. I mean, we expected John Mills to be pretty good, but I don't think we expected this type of season. I mean, he's the highest graded offensive lineman for UW, just edging out Jurassic Party. That should tell you something. Now, he's also a massive human being, just like Champ is, but he is the Jonah Savarena to Champ Wendell Moe. Like that type of connection, that experience, because I think Wendell played in 4 games in his freshman season, while Savarena played all 13 or 12 or what it ended up being. That to me is how you build this out 2-3 years down the line. And I'm not saying they're going to be, guaranteed day 2 or day 1 draft picks, but it would not surprise me because we see the progression from what Jedd's been able to do year in and year out, and they're just kind of following the same plan.
Lars, let's switch gears here because we need to talk some basketball because they saw another player in the front court roll his ankle. So we also got a chance to talk to Danny Sprinkle on Monday, and Washington is heading down to the Acrisure Invitational for the 2nd straight season in Palm Springs. They're going to play Nevada on Thursday, and then they'll play a game on Friday. Their opponent will depend on if they win or lose on Thursday. And it's unfortunate because it looks like they might be even more shorthanded than we thought. As Lathan Somerville, the Rutgers transfer, rolled his ankle at practice over the weekend, and Hannah Steinbach and Bryson Tucker have yet to return to practice. They weren't out there for the media, the portion of practice that was open to the media. I should note a couple of things here. One, Lathan Somerville was dressed as if he were part of practice. Maybe he just wasn't doing any contact stuff, so maybe it wasn't necessarily the worst thing, as Danny Sprinkle called Washington the sprained ankle capital of the world at this point in time. And the second thing is I've seen a lot on social media about what's the strength and conditioning staff doing? What's going on here? This really sucks because this is nothing more than just the worst luck you've ever seen. Because Desmond Claude is included in this. He stepped on somebody's foot in practice, rolls his ankle, is out 6 weeks with, as he told us after the Southern game, a grade 3 sprain. And now you see all these other ones come to fruition as well. It really is nothing more than bad luck. And obviously you still need to see these guys get healthy. You still need to see what it looks like. But at this point in time, this just, there's no other way around it. This really sucks.
It's true, but it's the injuries that you or I could have at the YMCA. It's just happenstance. It's not a matter of I'm glad you kind of touched on it because it's nothing that the strength staff could do short of telling Sprinkle not to practice.
Right.
That's really the only suggestion they could give at this point because everything else is just unlucky chance, but it's the best time you could have it. And I know Danny's not a glass half empty, glass half full guy. And but I'm saying if you're going to have this run of bad luck, have it now so you can get into January, February, March, get everybody healthy and see if you can find a way to sneak into the tournament. And that's really all that's the end goal here is just make an NCAA tournament appearance. Because given, you didn't luck with this roster, you worked to get this roster this good and this deep. And now luck is kind of just derailed half of it.
No, I completely agree. That's what I was going to say is it's better to have it happen now than in the middle of, your trip to Rutgers and Maryland or something like that. No, I do agree with you there. It's just, it sucks to have this happen at all. And to have it all be in the front court is its own just unfortunate problem where we're going to see Nicola Zapina come on campus here in a couple of weeks. Danny said the 10th or the 11th of December is his projected arrival date. He gave a positive update on Jacob Ognisevich, the Lipscomb transfer, who is out of his walking boot, by the way, after having foot surgery a couple of months ago. And right now the plan is to get him back in early January. So you're right. It's better to have this happen in non-conference play where you still can obviously rack up some solid wins, right? It was unfortunate that you weren't able to get that one at Baylor, but outside of that, that Southern team was really good. Danny Sprinkle talked about it after the game. That was a really talented team. Credit to him. And also a lot of credit to the Huskies who were playing shorthanded and were able to find a way to get that game into overtime after being down 12 points in the first half and get that game to double overtime after being down 5 points in the final 30 seconds of that game. Credit to Quimari Peterson, who was the guy that was able to do that in overtime and played all 50 minutes of that game. Like, this is still a team that very clearly has heart, has resolve, and has a lot of talent. Because I think that one of the exciting things that I'm looking for just to see what might happen this coming week from these injuries is, what is this going to look like now? Because Danny said, I'm going to have to get really creative with some 4-guard and 5-guard lineups, because the only healthy big man, ironically enough, is Frank Kepnong, who's had his unfortunate struggles with knee injuries over the course of his career. But this is one of those weeks where I feel like you can really unlock something from behind the 3-point line, because we've seen a lot of struggles shooting the basketball early on in the season. And I think that's one of the, I don't want to say uncharacteristic, but just because it's just hasn't been that much action, but just one of the more shocking things that we've seen from this team early on. And I don't know if it's because of the injuries, because Quimari missed a month during fall camp with a hamstring injury, because Zoom missed a couple of weeks with a concussion as well. But the fact that they haven't shot the ball nearly as well as some of the individual numbers from their past schools would indicate, with Quimari being a 40% guy from long range, Wesley Yates shooting 43, almost 44% last season from beyond the 3-point line. Obviously, we haven't seen Jacob yet, but there's just so much bad luck that has gone into this team so far that I don't want to say it has to even out at some point, right? Because that's certainly not the case. But with where this team is and how much talent it has, and what we saw in that Southern game showing that it has a lot of fight, it has a lot of passion, I like to think that this is just, some early season lulls as you try to figure some things out. And as these guys get healthy, especially Hannes Steinbach and Bryson Tucker, with what they've shown they can give you on the glass and just around the rim as well, I feel like everything is going to work out just fine for this team.
Yeah, when everybody's healthy, this team should be rocking and rolling better than one of the best in the Big Ten. But it's playing cohesively. I think that's kind of what we're hitting at here, is they haven't had a chance to all be on the same court at the same time. I mean, I know Danny said a number of times now this season, it feels like that we haven't really played 5-on-5 ball, in like a week and a half span or whatever the case may be. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of a problem. And so when you don't have guys being able to be on the same page and know when and where to hit certain guys for an open shot or things like that, and there's only 2 guys coming back. It's Zoom and Frank. Like, those are the only 2 guys that returned from last season. And yeah, again, you mentioned how ironic it is that Frank's the one front court guy that's not hurt. In a way, it reminded me of what Mike Hopkins used to say: play like Frank. Just play, all out. Go for it and do whatever. And that's also in a way why I think you added so many guard transfers this offseason, is guys that can be swing forwards or guards, but mostly guards. You have enough in the front court. It's about finding that open shot, which is kind of one of the keys to Danny's offense. And that's when you are able to facilitate and have a JJ Maniquit impact and have a, Coleman, Mulder and guys like that, whether it's freshmen or the transfers. You have all the talent there. It's just a matter of, can you get the pieces going and kind of getting it all cohesively together? Because when they do click, we will certainly see a massive uptick.
No, absolutely. And that's one of those things that we've seen a lot of solid individual success this season. Hannes Steinbach has looked awesome. He has looked like everything he was promised to be and then some so far early in the season. And then he rolls his ankle. And Bryson Tucker has taken that step forward that you were looking for. And he was thrust in the starting lineup because of the Desmond Claude injury. And Desmond Claude played 34 minutes and was cramping up after, again, a grade 3 ankle sprain that kept him out for almost 6 weeks. And to see what he looked like early on without being just fully back into shape was great. And we're seeing all of the talent shine through what Quimari Peterson was able to do. Well, as Danny put it, not just, playing 50 minutes, but guarding Southern's best player for the entire time and playing really good defense. Like, those are all really important parts of this as well. And as Zoom Diallo continues to develop, because he's looked really solid early in the season, I think that Baylor game, something really clicked for him. And he's always been a really great player, like going downhill in the mid-range. But I think that he's just starting to really figure it out, round out his game a little bit more, which was an exciting thing to think about. But you combine all that with, again, what's still to come. And Danny talked about it after the Baylor game, how many open shots they missed in that game. Those are the things that I think will even out. Those are the things that I think will, by the end of the season. Again, when you look at what all of these guys have done individually before arriving at Washington, you're not going to look at it and say, oh yeah, Wesley Yates is a 31% 3-point shooter this season. I don't think that that's going to be the case. by the time we hit the end of February, early March. It's around Big Ten tournament time. But as of right now, it's a great test for who is still healthy and who is available, because there's still, again, a lot of talent on this team. And that's the one thing I'm really excited to watch on Thursday, is how it can shine against some more adversity.
And a pretty decent team in Nevada as well. I think that's kind of, as you were making all those good points, I was thinking, if the basketball gods do exist, those shots that don't go down in those early games and things like that, where just for whatever reason there's a lid on the rim and things like that, where you're getting good shots, that Danny said, like, hey, I like most of our shot selection, not all of it, but most of it, and they just weren't falling. Like, that's just basketball. It's the way the ball bounces. You would hope then that luck turns around in a game like Nevada, where you're able to look, and that's a quad 1, quad 2 win. When you look at kind of how the resume would stack up at the end of the season come March, those are the games that really matter the most, where, yeah, you can beat, certain schools that are way down in the RPI rankings and things like that. But if you can beat a team like Nevada, especially, on the road, you're away from Husky Stadium, that is a significant, not just momentum builder, but a confidence boost to say, hey, even at our full strength, we're able to beat and hang with a team like Nevada, hang with Baylor, things like that, where if you don't have that type of positive outlook, you're now saying, okay, yeah, we can beat like the easy bye win games, but we should be better than that. And this is kind of that one of the latest tests to prove it.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thanks to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the season, so please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, we're there, we're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day, so please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.